Welcome to the S.O.A.P Bible Study Series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We are working our way through the book of Genesis. We're past the halfway point.
Way past.
We are
almost 3 chapters past.
We're done with all the, let's say, the preview stuff, right? The initial stuff. We're done with Abraham. We're done with Isaac. There are 2 patriarchs left. And they will take.
That's where we're going to take the rest of
the book of Genesis, really. Yeah. So Jacob now for a while, and then Joseph to finish it off.
So last week we heard about Isaac and Rebekah's story, and it sounded a lot like Abraham's. And we see deception all over the place and lying, and you talked about that last week. But where it mainly was Jacob and Rebekah. Providing deception, and they're tricking the dad, Isaac, into giving the blessing to Jacob instead of Esau. Mm-hmm. Now, we ended in chapter 28 and verse 9, so we're going to pick up in verse 10, and we find that Jacob's on the run. Mm-hmm. And he stole the blessing from Esau. Esau, the hunter, not the best guy to steal it from, is not happy. He has said, I'm going to kill him. I'll wait for dad to die, but I'm going to kill him.
Well, and they think dad's going to die. Isaac is going to die soon anyway, so he's doing all this. So yeah, you've got the wild game hunter after you.
Yeah, the guy who's staying in because he doesn't like the outdoors. Yeah. So Rebekah tells Jacob, "Go to my brother's house, find a daughter of his to marry," and then she also tricked Isaac, that we talked about last week, to say the same thing. Yeah. So Jacob takes off on a journey. Mm-hmm. I calculated at about 450 miles, probably somewhere. Yeah.
On foot.
Right. This is a commitment to drive, let alone on foot. And it's only Jacob.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be, and there's nobody with it.
Right.
He's on foot, he's by himself, and his brother is somewhere in the vicinity.
Right, and he's not necessarily a hunter either.
No, yeah. Right. We don't know exactly what they all packed up. Did mom pack him a lunch, or whatever, but... Right. I'm sure he had a camel or something. He probably wasn't on foot. There's
something.
Yeah,
but that could easily be taken away from him too. He didn't have. There's no indication that he went with other men for safety. Right. All right. So one night, Jacob dreams of a stairway to heaven, is what I'll call it, because that's what it is in the Bible. It says. So not to be confused with the song. The song stole from.
Not the other way around, right?
Yeah. But Jacob had a dream, and he literally saw a stairway going up into heaven. Yeah. And he saw angels coming down, and presumably angels going back up too. Mm-hmm. So it was a way to get angels back up. That's a pretty cool sight.
Yeah, so it's a dream as opposed to a vision. So
is there an escalator on it?
Yeah, So he's listening to God. He's not engaging. This is not a conversation like it would be in a vision. So what God is showing him, I'm still here with you. You may be by yourself, but I have angels who are watching, taking care of you. You don't have to worry.
Right. And then he tells him a number of things along that line. Well, he reconfirms the Abrahamic covenant again with Jacob, and he tells him that he's going to protect Jacob wherever he goes, and he'll bring him back safely.
Yes.
That's got to be a weight off here.
That's huge. That's huge.
Jacob, in turn, makes a conditional covenant with God, and he says, hey, God, if you're true to your word, which is kind of scary in my mind to make, but like you said, he doesn't have a great relationship with God yet.
Based on what we've seen in the family, right? I mean, he said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I didn't realize it.
Right.
Where's his theology? I mean, what does he know about God that...
Yeah, he doesn't.
Yeah.
Right, so he makes a conditional covenant saying, I'll give a tenth or a tithe to God of what God gave him.
Yeah. If you actually get me back home safely.
Yeah. Right.
If you bring me back, like you said. You know.
And we'll see, that's going to take about 20 years.
Yeah, well, it will. He didn't know that.
Yeah, right, at that point in time. Right. So Jacob ends up at his uncle's place, and this is his mother's brothers, and his name is Laban. Mm-hmm. And as you said, he is his mother's brother, and we'll find that he's a schemer also.
Yeah, he is if Jacob is a con man, Laban is
the teacher. He's the teacher.
Yeah, this is...
Don't mess with the master.
Yeah, exactly.
But as normal, Jacob ends up, it seems they always go to the well first, right? They're going to get water. And it seems like that's the center where everybody comes. So if you're new to a place, that's where you're going to meet people. That's where you're going to find people. That's where you can get information from.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what he needs. So he goes to this well, and this well is covered by a large stone. And the stone seems to be too big for any one person to move. So they wait until all the shepherds are there. They move the stone, and everybody gets water out of it at one time.
At the very least, it's big, and so either they need a lot of people to do it, or I mean, Jacob's going to do it, or they just wait because they don't need things falling into the well or whatever. Okay. So they wait until everyone's there, do your thing, get it done, close it back up. You know, it's a safety thing, maybe.
Yeah. So there's a young lady there by the name of Rachel. This is, we'll find out, is one of Laban's daughters, and she was identified to Jacob by one of the shepherds.
Yeah.
And Jacob then rolls the stone away by himself, and he waters the sheep of his uncles, which is kind of cool.
Yeah,
right?
So it's sort of backward, because when Abraham sent his servant, Rebekah watered the camels. This time, instead of waiting for someone to serve him, Jacob actually served Rachel, which was sort of cool.
Yeah. Of course, Laban heard what would happen, or what happened, you know, named Jacob as a relative of his, and Jacob stayed with Laban. I think it's going to turn out to be a month.
Yeah.
Before the next section.
What this also means is that this, don't forget, 77 years old is Jacob at this point.
Right.
He's never met his uncle. He's never met his cousins. They've never seen each other. They've had no contact with this side of the family at this point. So he shows up. He's like, "I'm Jacob." Who, right? You know, it's not like they're sending text pictures. Oh, look at the boys.
Yeah, Mom sent me this picture. Mom gave me this picture when you guys were young.
Right.
Yeah, so after about a month, Laban and Jacob, they discuss his pay, which makes sense. Mm-hmm. And Jacob was in love with Rachel, and it says she had a lovely figure and a beautiful appearance. So he said, I will work for you for 7 years in exchange for your younger daughter, Rachel. Mm-hmm. And Laban agreed, and Jacob worked for those 7 years.
Yep.
Right. So bam, we're now seven years ahead.
Yep. But it seemed like only a few days because of his great love for Rachel.
It did, and it seemed like a few sentences to us. Yeah, it did say that, didn't it? Yeah. After 7 years, Laban, he holds a feast. And I'm sure there is, like any kind of feast, a wedding type celebration.
Yeah, big wedding party, no holds barred, right?
And he gives his oldest daughter, Leah, to Jacob. So I think you know the question that's coming. He didn't know. Jacob doesn't know.
We don't know exactly what the customs were back then.
Right.
They went through the whole thing. She was veiled. He did not know until the next morning.
Right.
Right? There's no electricity. Yeah, there's probably some kind of candle or torch, but if it's in a tent, you still have to be careful. It's at night, even if there's a big bonfire, like you said, she's dressed up, veiled or whatever. Right. He didn't find out until the next morning. Wait a minute.
Right. So the deception here, but also for Leah, right? She had to be at least part of it.
Well, yeah.
Right. And so anyways, Jacob confronts Laban, which he definitely should. And Laban says, it's our custom for the older daughter to be married first.
Yeah. How did that conversation? He's like, well, that's true. I know what I promised you, but so here's the thing.
Right, exactly. Now, I do work with a number of people from India, and I have talked to them about, when are you going to get married? That kind of thing is normal conversation. And it is, I can't until my older sister gets married.
Even today.
Yeah,
wow.
Exactly. And that was bizarre to me because it was something different. It was like, all right, let's talk through this. No, we have to get married in order. And it's shame on the family, it's shame on the daughter. There's no way I'm doing that. And it was like they were like appalled that I would even say, just get married. What's the big deal? But it's arranged marriages and it's a whole family thing too.
Yeah. So exactly what we're exactly what we're saying.
2,000 years later, still the same. Yeah. So Jacob agrees to work for another 7 years to get Rachel. So that'll be 14 years now. But you need to notice that he's actually with her the week after the bridal week with Leah.
Right. So a wedding ceremony back then would take about a week, right? So you have the party, you have the ceremony, you have everything. Week is over. Now they're officially married, the whole thing, right?
Right.
And so then he gets Rachel right away, even before he works for the other
Right.
7
So
years.
on store credit.
Yeah. So we have 2 sisters in 2 weeks, and now we're married, and now he has to work her off, work it
Right.
off, right?
Right.
For the next 7 years. But yeah, he's married to the 2 sisters.
Yeah. And then we find the line, Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah.
So I wonder where he learned to love one member of the family more than someone else. This goes all the way back to when he was a child, and
Right.
Rebecca loved him, and Isaac loved Esau.
Right,
And,
showing sides.
Yeah.
Right. And we'll see, this also causes problems, although not as bad. But
yeah,
it
not
does-
yeah.
So God noticed and enabled Leah to become pregnant and prevented Rachel from becoming pregnant.
Which is really interesting because this is we see that theme several times in the Old Testament when God is about to do something big, right? Sarah couldn't have children, and then we have Isaac. We have Rachel can't have children, and then we're going to have Benjamin and Joseph. Hannah could not have children, and we get Samuel. We see sort of this pattern where God withholds this until he's ready to move. So it's just sort of interesting that we have that here.
Yeah. So Leah gives birth to Reuben, then Simeon, then Levi, then Judah, and these names should be kind of
Starting to sound a little familiar,
yeah,
right?
yeah, because these are going to be the tribes of Israel that even to this day,
Yeah.
their name there.
Yep.
And after each birth, Leah hopes that Jacob would love her more.
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen.
Doesn't happen.
I mean that's tough.
Yeah.
After Judah, she praised God, which seemed to be the first time that she praised God, and although she did pray to God each time afterwards, and she stopped having children.
Judah actually means praise. So his name actually. So there's a
Well,
word
we're
play.
definitely going to see a wordplay with it with other ones too.
Yeah. Every single one of these names. This is the thing about Hebrew names is the Hebrew names are just Hebrew words that are built into a name. So they all mean something. So they were named, especially these, like you said, these were named for very specific reasons, and their names carried a lot of meaning, which we tend to forget as we think of the tribes of Israel or whatever. But these names can carry through. Right, all the way through. Even though we don't read them again, the meanings of the names carry through. Right. So as they're calling out, to young Judah, there's praise, type thing.
Right. Yeah, nice. In chapter 30, we see a passive-aggressive wife fight. is the way I'm putting it. And the rest of the tribe of Israel being born. So Rachel was jealous; she couldn't have any children. Yeah. So as custom, she gave her servant to her husband to have really surrogate children in her place,
like Sarah did with Hagar.
Yep.
And Ishmael came.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. So so they had a son by the name of Dan, and that meaning is he vindicated, or this baby is now my vindication, and I provided for my husband.
Yep.
And then they had another son. Is it Nephtali?
Naphtali.
Naphtali.
Yep.
Okay. Which means my struggle.
Yeah.
Which was against her sister Leah.
Yep.
Leah.
Yep.
Leah saw she stopped having children, so she gave her servant.
Did the same thing.
She did the exact same thing.
So now Jacob has 2 wives and 2. Today we would say mistresses or concubines. Not full wives.
But they were definitely their wife's servant.
Yeah.
And as part of their servant duties.
Well, so even though, like you said, they're the sons. These are all sons, by the way. The sons have full son status because even though they were born through the servant, they were officially going to be Leah's and Rachel's legally. So Jacob had all these sons, and it's not like, so they were all half brothers within these 4 women, but none of them were like, oh well, you're concubine, you don't get any inheritance, you don't get anything. So the sons were all on the same level.
But a daughter would.
So a daughter won't get any inheritance at all in this tradition, and there will be a sister. There will be a sister named later, but so far they're all sons, which is crazy, actually. I mean, just the fact that they're only sons.
Right. So Leah stopped having children. Servant. They had a son named Gad, which means good fortune, and then another one named Asher, which means happy one, and Leah was happy again. Reuben, because all these would take time, and I don't know how many we're at so far, but Reuben found some mandrake plants, and that was an aphrodisiac of the time, and brought it to his mother, who was Leah, and Rachel wanted them. So Leah said, you can go to bed with Jacob if Leah gave the mandrakes to Rachel. So Leah becomes pregnant and she gives birth to Issachar, and these are great names, Zebulun and Diana.
Dinah, yeah.
Or Dinah?
Yep. So we have, Issachar and Zebulun and Dinah. So now we have 10 sons, 6 of them from Leah.
Right.
2 each from the maidens, right? The servants, and still none biologically from Rachel.
Well, that's kind
and a daughter. And a daughter. So we have 11 kids between really only 3 women at this point.
Right.
Right?
Right. And it's huge, right? So now Rachel becomes pregnant.
And so, so we have to assume that this is, assuming this is, linear, I mean, this is 10 or 11 years that have gone by now.
Right. Right. Definitely could be some overlay with some of the women, but
a little bit. Yeah, I mean, you're not going more than 9 months out, right? For each, so Leah has 4 in a row. You're looking at 3 to 4 years. Then you have a couple, right?
Right. So Rachel becomes pregnant finally and gives birth to Joseph. And like you said, we're still missing Benjamin at this point.
Yeah.
Jacob asks Laban so now Jacob's like, okay, I got this family. So he asked Laban to bless him and send him on his way so he could go home with his wives and children. Right? That was a plan from the beginning. Right? Go down there, find a wife, come back. So now he's done with that. Laban, of course, the schemer, asks him to stay. And the reason he asks him to stay is because Laban's smart enough to realize God has blessed Jacob. And that has helped make Laban wealthy.
Right.
And he wants that to continue.
So this section is what helps us with our math, because we're, thinking, like I said, 10 or 11 years. It seems like all of these children were born in the 7 years that he was working for Rachel. Okay.
Right. And so now
he's ready to go.
He asked because he's at the end of that second 7 years.
My 7 years. I've been here for 14 years. I've got all of these kids, and I'm ready to go back. So like you were talking about the overlapping with the children, this actually supports that. It seems like they're all born within that 7-year period. Yeah.
Okay. Laban wanted to give Jacob a gift, right, which would be part of the blessing. So they settled on Jacob would continue to watch the sheep and goats, and Jacob could keep the spotted ones or the speckled ones, either the goats or the sheep, as his wages, right? So the deal was, okay, you watch my sheep. As the inferior sheep come out, you can keep those, and the other sheep are mine. And any animal in Jacob's possession that wasn't his would be considered stolen. And they made this agreement. And then Jacob or Laban, he moved his flock 3 days away. Right, I'm going to keep my primary flock 3 days away. Now we have this flock here. Some of these sheep are going to come out pure. Some are going to come out spotted. Those are mine, and the other ones are yours, but out of this. Everything's good there. There's agreement there. Now, with this next part, it gets a little bit weird. And do you see this part as God's doing, or do you think it's something else?
So there seems to be some superstition in here, right? If the branch that I put out there in the watering hole is spotted, then they'll have a spotted lamb, type thing. And
right.
I don't know that. I mean, I'm not an animal geneticist or anything, but it seems weird that looking at a spotted branch is going to make a spotted lamb.
Right, but I would think a guy who's been around sheep and goats for his entire, or for the past 14 years, would have a pretty good idea of if I put these two things together, am I going to get spotted or not spotted coming out?
So obviously, I sort of laughed when you said Laban wants to give him a gift. Laban doesn't give gifts. Laban
from his heart.
Yeah, it was. Laban is a master con man, right? Jacob has learned over 14 years also to be a master con man between now his mother and 14 years with Uncle Laban. Right. So we have this little dance that's going around. Right. And so Laban says, let's do this. And Jacob says, okay, let's do it this way. And so there's this
scheming.
And the art of the deal is going on, right? And so they finally settle on this. And Jacob, like you said, he knows these sheep. He's been working with them, these land, these goats and everything. I think, let's not forget, we haven't seen God really show up a lot in the last several chapters,
Right.
right? A little bit in chapter
Right.
28, but this is not.
That doesn't mean
these
he's
are
not
not
behind the
God-fearing people. They're
Right.
not spending a lot of time, worshiping or trying to find God's way of doing things. So I think Laban and Jacob are playing the manipulation game, and God is in the background saying, you guys can play whatever you want, but I'm still the one at work here, right? So did Jacob trust God to build his wealth? I don't think so.
Right.
Did he trust the superstition?
Maybe.
Maybe,
Right.
but I think it was
Did he
God
have some-
who was actually
yeah, doing
doing the work,
Yeah.
whether Jacob realized it or really thought about it.
Yeah, so what I got out of it also is he knew enough to take Laban's strong male sheep and mate them with his, and that the offspring was going to be strong
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
So it ended up way in favor of Jacob.
Yeah.
And Jacob now has this massive flock of sheep
Yeah.
and goats. Laban has some.
Yeah.
But they seem to be the inferior of the two.
Yeah.
And that's going to cause problems for next week.
It is, yeah. And then in the next chapter, we'll find out a little bit more about the dating and how long it takes and what's going on. We don't get all the details, obviously, but sort of what's going on. There's going to be another interchange between Jacob and Laban as things sort of come to a head in this. So,
Right. But we do know that Jacob's wealth is growing and he became extremely prosperous.
oh yeah, yeah, really, really big time. And now he's ready to
Ready to go back.
ready to start his own family. Not his biological family, but it's time to get out from underneath Uncle Laban's umbrella. I want my own space. I want my own whatever. It's time to move on.
Right. Right.
So, yeah, and that's where we end.
Yeah.
11 sons, 1 daughter, and this itching for
Get life
something
started.
different. Yeah.
Yeah. Get my life started.
Well, how old is he now?
77 plus.
14.
Yeah.
We're at 91 years.
I'm ready.
And I'm ready to start my life. But I mean, you can see that. So again, as we always say, read it thoughtfully and carefully. There's some really good stuff in here, especially seeing what God seems to condone and what he seems to condemn. Where is he in the whole scheme of things? What's going on here? They seem to invoke God, but they don't seem to actually follow him. So watch for those things as you're reading that this week. And if you have questions or comments, we would love to discuss those with you. Send those over either in a comment or an email or whatever. We would love to respond to those. Subscribe, share, do all the things that we do, and we will pick up here next time.